Hey everyone, this is Mike Wolf and welcome to the Food Tech Show. Today's show is about space food. Anyone who's been listening to the Food Tech Show or reads The Spoon may know that I'm a fan of this topic, space food, this idea that at some point we're going to have to feed those going into space for a long-term space travel, traveling to Mars, and maybe even figure out a way to feed those folks Matt Damon style for a long time when they get there, maybe permanently. So this is a topic that I've loved to write about and talk about. And so this is a fun show. And we really have the perfect guest for the show. We have Anjan Contractor, the CEO of BHEX. If you remember a few years ago reading about that company that built a pizza printer, a 3D pizza printer for space, that was Anjan's company, and he did it for NASA. And so he has experience actually building equipment to make food in space. He's thought about it. He's an engineering whiz. We also have with us Dane Goebel, the operations director for the Deep Space Food Challenge. The Deep Space Food Challenge is a centennial challenge put on by NASA. It's also in cooperation with the Canadian Space Agency, and they're also inviting international participants to join. So it's a really interesting collaboration between all these different partners with the idea of looking towards the future and getting innovators to create food products, food technologies, food systems to help feed astronauts and ultimately long-term inhabitants of space. And so we had a good conversation. It was, as is usual these days, put on Clubhouse. So we usually do these during the week. We oftentimes announce them. So if you want to join these live and ask some of these really interesting people we're interviewing questions, make sure to go to Clubhouse and follow the Food Tech Live Club on Clubhouse. So, all right, folks, that's it for now. Let's get to the conversation. You know, Anjan, you and I have talked, I think, for going on probably 5 years now, because I was bugging you from the early days when you were building your pizza printer, 3D pizza printer.
Yeah, that's right.
And I've been writing about your most recent efforts in like the cake printing stuff, which is a lot of fun. Anjan, tell folks a little bit about yourself and how a little bit about your company, BHEX.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Mike, for allowing me to talk about my work over here, and it's great connecting with Dane, and thanks everyone for listening to this. So, you know, my story is very interesting. My background is in mechanical engineering, mainly in additive manufacturing and robotics, and I have developed a variety of technology for NASA in the past, also some of the technologies for Air Force and Skunk Works. But my latest work with NASA was on 3D food printing for deep space missions. And most of the people associate my work with 3D pizza printing. But pizza was the first item Advanced Food Lab at Johnson Space Center had requested me to print, and that took off. But the very original idea was that when astronauts go to deep space missions, or whenever they leave higher Earth orbit, for NASA, the return on investments are justified only if the mission is 6+ months, and there are projects which are critical in providing some crucial information, such as atmospheric changes on Earth, or understanding of different asteroids, or understanding of radiation levels on different equipment, including foods and whatnot. So whenever astronauts go for a mission like this, they would be working for 15+ hours a day, sometimes condensed amount of sleep, very little sleep, or no sleep at all. And sleeping in a microgravity environment is also challenging. So how do we provide them the nutrients which can help them sustain their physiological health? So the idea was to personalize their foods with robot. And I started out as a principal investigator back then. I started out with additive manufacturing technology. And over the course of years, I started my own company to provide food personalization. So that's in a nutshell story about BHEX, about my work with NASA, and throughout this discussion, I will talk about what we are doing. But I would also like to hear what Dane has to say, how he came about.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Thanks, Anjan. That's fascinating. So for my part, I'm with the Methuselah Foundation, which is it's a charity that has historically been in the longevity space. So it got started in the early 2000s and kind of kickstarted what became the radical longevity movement. And over time, I would say that the science that we were engaged in became less focused on things like gene knockout and small molecule interventions, and more on macro development of macro technologies that can do things like replace pieces of tissue, organs, and that sort of thing. And so, what led us to NASA was the early version of the New Organ Prize, which became the Vascular Tissue Challenge. And so that was to produce, either through 3D printing or growing with some sort of matrix, a small piece of organ tissue that could viably be transplanted into an animal. And so NASA was interested in that for probably pretty obvious reasons. It's a little bit futuristic for sure, but naturally, if you don't have the tissues that an astronaut's going to need if they've been injured, then you're going to have a real problem up there. So we worked with NASA on the Vascular Tissue Challenge for the last few years, and it's actually winding down now. We found a few companies were attracted to the thing, and it looks like some really, really cool stuff is coming out of it. And then they came to us for this food challenge, which is certainly a little bit further afield than what we typically have been involved in, but it's actually totally in line with our mission. So whereas before we were more obviously focused on, individual longevity or interventions that certainly could affect as many people in the population who could afford it, who had access to it, this is something that I think is hacking a little bit more at the roots of human life support systems, whether terrestrially or out in space. And so we were really interested in being involved in something that was a little bit more about species longevity and creating the opportunities for the human race to not only engage in exploration and colonization, but also to affect change here on Earth as far as filling food gaps. I think depending on who you talk to, there's an incredibly there's an enormous number of people who, of course, go hungry every day, but there's also the expectation that food gap is going to grow significantly as population expands. Of course, there's a lot of different opinions about to what degree that's going to happen, but I think everyone can agree that there's a lot of opportunity for more local production and decentralized food systems. And so that's how we got involved, and the competition now has been running since January, and we're about a month away from registration closing. So that's the short story of what's going on there, and I can get into greater detail later.
That's great. And Dean, if for people to have a little bit of context, can you maybe go into at a very high level, kind of the Cliff Notes version of the Deep Space Food Challenge? It is interesting to me that there's a partnership between Canada Space Agency and NASA. It's kind of running two simultaneous challenges in a way. I also think it's interesting that you have an international participant component of it that is kind of running alongside it as well. But just at a high level, describe what this thing is so people understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So NASA and CSA have, depending on the nomenclature, they've collaborated or are working on something that is, the rules are largely shared, but there are different eligibility requirements. There are completely different prize purses, different management. So they're completely separate prizes that are super aligned, both in goals and in spirit, and in the actual specific technical constraints that are found in the actual rules themselves. And the international piece of it is something that that we're working on somewhat independently, but in conjunction with NASA. So the way that it works is the Canadian prize and the NASA prize both are funded. In terms of their prize purse, Canada is fully funded from phase 1 through 3, which is essentially running from the next 3 years. Phase 1 being a design application. detailed design application, phase 2 being a table demo, TRL4, and then the third phase is a full production ready model. NASA is the same thing, except we only have congressional funding at this point for phase 1, but we're very optimistic that we're going to get through phase 2 and 3. And then the international prize is something that is where the Canadian Space Agency and NASA are collectively going to issue recognition awards for the top 10 international teams. But it's we have the capacity to do actual fundraising for that. So we're in the process of trying to come up with something there that is able to better incentivize international teams to be involved. And in both cases, the Canadian prize and the U.S. prize, it's not a 1 through 20 team sort of thing. It's each team, the best teams that satisfy the constraints, are all going to be recognized equally. So for the United States prize, phase 1 is a $500K prize pot for the top 20 teams who would receive each $25K, and the Canadian side is $300K Canadian for 10 teams, $30K for 10 teams.
That's great background. And this effort in just general kind of shows me that NASA is getting, and not that they have been, but they're getting very serious, I think, about long-term space travel and food, both to be brought along, but also generated in space for long-term inhabitation of space travel, and then maybe even long-term once you reach your destination. But Anjan, listening to Dane and kind of your process and you getting plugged into NASA, I'd be kind of interested, kind of now that you're caught up a little bit on, you may already have been caught up on what they're doing, how food innovation and kind of exploration about food concepts for space driven by NASA has maybe changed, and how it's a little bit different from the way you got plugged in versus what's happening with Dane.
Yeah. So historically, what I've learned, NASA has been very much involved in hydroponics. Since the early 90s, there has been quite a bit of research funding gone into growing plants in space and what it takes, what sort of energy does it take to grow plants, and how it balances the microenvironment in the space shuttle or a spaceship. It is particularly challenging in the sense that the resources that plants require up in space are limited, and recycling water, recycling a lot of ingredients, human waste, and how do we use that back for plants is particularly challenging. And then there was I consider that as phase 1 in early 90s, and then phase 2 I consider as how do we encapsulate food in a way that it can have a higher shelf life. So there was a lot of research at one point of micro-encapsulating different dry ingredients, and that technology, in a commercial world, it has spun out into baby foods or baby formulas. They particularly have very long shelf life, and when you mix it with water, that micro-encapsulated layer dissolves in the water, and you gain all the micronutrient benefits in that mixture. So that phase 2 I consider was slowly enhancing the shelf life to 2 years, 3 years, and then the targets went even more optimistic, up to 5 years and even 10 years. And when I came into looking at the nature of where we stand, they were still working on that, not only working on the microencapsulation part, but how do radiation affect this microencapsulation, its quality, degradation, and whatnot. But one major challenge that NASA faced, and this is documented in a lot of technical papers over years, was the psychological health of astronauts by consumption of only viscous form of food. Let me put it the other way. Long time ago, even in 1970s, 1980s, NASA developed technique to convert orange into powder form, and it commercialized in a form of Tang. I mean, I think most of the people know what is Tang, and that Tang was the basis of this making everything in the powder form, even broccoli or any sort of vegetables or even meats, and then microencapsulating them, and then rehydrating up in the spaceship and then consuming that type of food was one of the objectives which they started evaluating with humans, and pretty soon realized that there is a limited time after that. All these astronauts, or even mainly done on the trials done on human subjects, they started feeling that they crave for texture, and their psychological health started deteriorating because they were not given these textured foods, because chewing releases chemical that make you psychologically balanced and happier. So now they were back to zero. That what do? We have invested so much into this. How do we utilize this powder form technology and convert it back to texture? That's when my research came in, which was make this powder into palatable form using robots and 3D printers. So it was somewhat successful in the sense that my building blocks were literally powder form, and I mixed it into mixing chamber with oils and water, and then deposited, created the form and texture which were appealing to astronauts. So where we are going now in the future is a mixture of all these technologies we have developed over time, including hydroponics. How will be the split is somewhat unknown at this point. And to be very honest, NASA has not been putting a lot of effort in after, I would say, 2015 to determine newer forms of foods. One of the forms they should be looking into, which they haven't, is cultured meat, cultured seafood, cultured meats, and looking into radiation effect of those type of foods, their shelf life, their growth and conversion into the type of cells that they are looking into. Those things are something they should start funding immediately if the target to go to Mars is sometime around 2035, or even there is a talk about setting up a moon base, and one of the objectives of the moon base is to set up a food lab. So a lot of research on space food can happen on moon. So this is the direction where I think NASA should be going, but at the same time I feel there isn't enough effort being put by the agency that should be put into.
That's so interesting. Dane, do you think with what you're doing with the Deep Space Food Challenge, NASA, this is maybe part of NASA's efforts to address this? Because I know in our pre-conversation, you're open to all comers, including cultured meat, including all these other, any sort of interesting food concepts. Is this maybe partly trying to address what Anjan's concerned about?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Anjan, I was going to mention if we can talk offline or something, but I'm actually going to be talking, giving an intro to the prize at the Cultured Meat Symposium next week. So if you want to join and maybe be part of the space panel or something like that, that'd be incredibly cool if you're not already going. But yeah, absolutely, Michael. they're trying to they're putting this out there, and they're trying to be as open-minded as possible in terms of methodology. They put no limitation whatsoever, except really they put out judging criteria, so it's to fill food gaps for a crew of 4 for 3 years, right? But what those food gaps are, they're not specific. They're not saying this has to be something to fill every single need. They're looking to really get a wide variety of novel ideas and approaches. So, not just a new way of growing lettuce, or not just a new way of doing, meal replacement bars, which have historically been, suboptimal. There's a lot of different things that can be done. Anything from, your traditional kind of quasi MRE sort of thing, which aren't that great but could be dramatically improved, all the way to figuring out how to do potato aeroponics, to Anjan's like 3D printing food up there. But there's a lot of room when you're talking about an end-to-end food system for a variety of different approaches, all kind of Frankenstein together, much in the way that in your kitchen or in your pantry, or you think about a grocery store, all the technologies that are used to pull all of those different actual end food products together. So they're trying to do everything that they can to give food innovators the opportunity to throw their wild and crazy ideas out there. As the way that this challenge works, like I mentioned before, the first phase is the design application. So you do not actually need to have a prototype. You do not need to have a food product. You just need to be able to pitch very, very effectively and rigorously. And then from there, then you have a lot more time to actually get it to the prototype phase. But yeah, NASA is doing their absolute best to make this as easy as possible for people, for companies and universities who are at any stage in their product development life cycle. Whether it's a large company with an R&D department and who has 20 ideas they don't know quite what to do with, but it'd be really cool if you could get them in front of NASA, to somebody who's a graduate student who just happens to be in food tech and just says, oh my God, I have a cool idea, and so-and-so doesn't want to fund it, but I can put it out here and it maybe can move the ball forward. NASA's trying to make it as easy as possible. So the requirements are really that it has to be the food component, the food system component. It doesn't have to be a full food system necessarily, but the food system component cannot be larger than 2 cubic meters in volume. And then you have to define all of your inputs and the outputs and how it handles water and that sort of thing. It has to be able to fit through a specific size doorway. It can't have an average energy draw higher than 1,500 watts. So they're really trying to make this as open as possible because they're trying to get a wide variety of novel ideas.
One of the things I've always loved about space food, just this generation, going back to like the 60s and the space race, between the Soviet Union and the U.S., is so much of that innovation ultimately produced a lot of the food we're familiar with. Anjan, you mentioned Tang. There's obviously freeze drying. A lot of people may know this who are deep into the and nerdy on kind of the future of protein, is a lot of these new gas fermentation based food from thin air companies like Air Protein, like Solar Foods, which is actually working with the European Space Agency. That technology was really kind of defined and first generation was built during the first space race. And so I guess, one of the things people may say when they look at these types of things, why would a company looking at the Deep Space Food Challenge, for example, want to build something because the prize money is not that great? I think the flip side of that coin, and Anjan, I think you could speak to this maybe with kind of what you've done since you built that first pizza printer, is there's commercialization opportunities for food here on our home planet. So you may get a contract with NASA and maybe you can feed people in the future on Mars, but also I think a lot of this innovation ultimately goes towards feeding people at home, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're to the point with your argument right there, Mike. So one of the things we were looking into when we were developing this 3D printer for creating textures of very personalized micronutrients was that NASA has quite strong patents on how they microencapsulate their nutrients, and it naturally increases the shelf life to 5+ years. So now when we talk about world hunger, there is direct solution right there. So commercializing this sort of powder technology and recreating texture is something that can be very useful in a long term. In a short run, refugee camps and wherever there is natural disaster, if there are huge amount of population displaced, this sort of technology can be very useful. But at the same time, Mike, I also want to put this point forward that right now, not a lot of companies think space is something they can invest and harvest capital out of that investment. But I strongly believe that that is going to shift because there are some tremendous benefit that we have. That, and this research has come from NASA as well, that some manufacturing or some type of fabrications are much more cost effective in space because of microgravity environment. For example, organ and tissue growth. One challenge that when we were doing some tissue printing, we realized that if we have a media with cell culture and we deposit layer by layer on top of each other, after a certain height, we see the sedimentation of the cells at the bottom. Now, when you have sedimentation of the cells, the growth of the cells at the top will be very robust, but the ones at the bottom will be deprived from the nutrients available in the media. Now, this does not happen if we are 3D printing or we are fabricating tissue in microgravity environment. So this is something that was very striking, that if this technology shows promise in terms of higher level of yield of the type of cells we are looking into for tissues, and if we can fabricate something as complex as organ, the best place to do that is space. Now, this is something that falls under deep tech realm, but at the same time, it is very essential that we harvest space as a manufacturing hubs or industrial hubs, not just means to study Earth or something that is sci-fi and space travel taking as a priority versus developing manufacturing hubs up in space. So that's how I perceive investing in space or developing newer technology in space, and how it can be useful not only for Earth, but also when we look into future technologies, especially deep tech.
That's great. Dane, I think you told me that one of the criteria that is considered, maybe it's a judging criteria, is applications of the technology on Earth as well. So it's you want to have innovators come in, build interesting systems to build food for space, but is also one of the benefits or one of the things you guys want them to focus on is, can this also make and have a benefit here on Earth?
Yeah, absolutely. So 15 points of the total judging criteria are based on the possible terrestrial applications of the technology. So in particular, the Canadian side is especially interested in that because they have such a substantial remote community, which are, of course, highly reliant on very, very costly supply chains. And when those break down, people starve in the far north. So you have some of that in America, but it's especially problematic in Canada. So 15% of the judging criteria is all around terrestrial applications. And as Anjan was saying, I mean, if you can really deliver on this premise, the meta premise of it, you're able to make a huge fundamental dent in food scarcity on Earth. And if you can deliver on not just providing macronutrients but also variety, you can provide the right, of course, the right amount of micronutrients. But if you're able to produce food that actually feels like food, that has the right texture, and you have a variety of different kinds of food, then you're able to pretty much you're able to satisfy the need of a human being to be able to enjoy what they eat and be kept alive by it. So, you want to have astronauts that are eating food that tastes like home, and you want to be able to solve the variety of different food crises that are happening on Earth with something like that too, so that you're not demanding something of people that is going to put psychological strain on them. And I just wanted to jump back to what Anjan said about the empowerment that actually working in microgravity gives you. That I think it's funny that there's actually so many cool things that you can do up there that you can't do down here that can make things easier. So as much of it's like an incredibly controlled and resource scarce environment, it's also amazing stuff that you can do up there, especially when it comes to organ printing. So that's something that we, when we did the Vascular Tissue Challenge, we were very, very hopeful that you'd be able to end up doing some really, really cool stuff up there. So it's ironic how much space wants to kill you, but how it's actually there's a lot of things that are somehow it's easier to keep somebody alive up there if you have the right tools, ironically.
I never really thought about this, but Anjan, I'd be curious to, one of the things that is a very simple, it's a fact that a lot of people don't know, like flying in a plane, food tastes different than when you're on Earth, right? Like I actually like Bloody Marys when I'm on a plane, but like it's saltier or it's less salty. When you're elevated, food tastes different. I imagine that is one of the main considerations you're thinking about, like how food is different in different gravity environments.
Yeah, we have heard this comment from astronauts over and over. Up in space, their taste buds become numb, and they tend to eat a lot more spicier food up there than what they could eat at Advanced Food Lab when they go for taste testing. This is something we have seen over and over, and it's funny that many astronauts, when they are here on Earth, they never tried spicy food, and they were very adverse to anything that is very hot. So they would immediately say, "Hey, before they go up there, they go to the food lab and they make their selection of what they like and with what they don't like, and then NASA pack their food." So especially during their first trip, all the scientists and food lab staff, they know that they're going to select everything mild and less salt, and everything in most raw form as possible. And once they go up there, they immediately realize they can't taste anything. They need more salty food, more spicy food. So when they prepare for the second trip, they make sure that everything is elevated in taste. There is slightly more salt, slightly more spicy, slightly more hot. And then, their first trip is always more challenging than the second and third. But it also includes their food. They don't enjoy their food as much during their first trip compared to subsequent trips. Not to mention, they're trained. They're all trained to eat whatever is available. But at the same time, they are also human beings, and they prefer food that is tastier than that is not. So this is something that was very interesting to me when they all had the same opinion that they want more spicy and more saltier food. And what happens is that when they come back, for some time, they still prefer more spicier and saltier food, and then they settle down after some time.
That's so interesting. For those of you in the audience, I do want to say, if you have a question, we're going to start taking questions here, so feel free to raise your hand. We can bring you up on stage. I'd love to have you come up on stage. I may have mentioned this to you, Dane, when we were talking, but there is a group out of Japan, for example, JAXA has been working with another company, Sigmaxis, and a few other partners, developing under the original name was Space Food X, but it's a large consortium of industry food companies with like a 20 to 30 year time horizon about developing food for space. I like that approach. It feels like maybe that's something that, Anjan, you'd like to see more of. I also think, U.S. is good around driving innovation with these types of challenges, but I think maybe a longer term roadmap would be really interesting. You think we'll ever get there?
Yeah, Michael, that's a very good point. So, I was talking to one of the leading scientists at Advanced Food Lab at Johnson Space Center. That was in the middle of pandemic, and I was trying to understand the vision that was set forth for the moon base and for this Mars mission. And she mentioned to me that there isn't a set plan. Usually, all this Advanced Food Lab, they look at the vision, those documents coming out of DC. NASA office, and then they lay out their projects, and then the funds are appropriated based on that. But I did not. She mentioned that it significantly lack the planning out of the vision, and she would have liked to see a very strong vision of a granular vision per se. Of this is the technology that is more suitable and needs more attention and funding to test out in a near term, so it can be significantly tested in the future at a moon base. And the conversation led us to a conclusion that I think involvement of private companies in the U.S. who is passionate about this and who believe that space will be a significant industry in the next 20 years should start now. And we have already seen that there are quite a few venture capital firms investing in space tech, but at least few of them who have approached us. We as a company in general, we solidified our base more on commercializing our product on Earth. We haven't dwelled a whole lot of time in researching space food further or advancing our hardware and software for space tech. But just talking to Dane, I think we should recalibrate our capability and align ourselves to what opportunities are available in space tech for food hardware and software.
That's exactly what I like to hear. I really truly hope that guys like you are going to be brought back into the fold and actually see this as a viable opportunity to put resources into, especially people who have had their head in this space for a while. There's nothing cooler than doing something for space, but it's not always like economically feasible in the short term. But if there's a significant or there's enough an outcry of public interest and an enormous amount of publicity around it, which is then enables you guys to get the kind of financing that you need. And if you're able to make technology, of course, that has terrestrial application where you're essentially just doing some minor repackaging, then it seems like something that makes a lot more sense. So I'm so glad that you were able to do this, Anjan, because I specifically wanted to actually ask you, like, why, what would it take for guys like you to actually get re-involved in this sort of thing? Because, we want nothing more than to attract kind of people who have a lot of experience in this field and are able to galvanize their own communities to assist them in the actual prosecution of the mission.
Yeah, this question comes to us as an organization very often. Every quarter we look into this. Is it a right time for us to go into this area? And to be honest, there isn't a better time than this. We can jump into this any time with all of our potential. Let me tell you a little bit about what happened after my NASA project. So when I started company, my first seed investment came from Jim Grody. He's a founder of Donato's Pizza. There are about 200 restaurants in Midwest. But he also started another company called Grody Company, which is less known. But it is a gold standard in commercial kitchen food processing equipment area. And so when he invested, he also had a vision of investing into a huge campus that can do new type of food research, food equipment research, robotics, AI, machine learning. And as a result, today, after I think his dream came true in 2019, early 2019, when he opened up Edge Innovation Hub to enable all these newer type of food technologies. And one of the vision that he had was to establish a space food institute within the realm of this framework of Edge Innovation Hub. And he wanted me to set up goals of how do we go about that. And I'm so glad that I'm talking in this panel today with you, Dan. I think we should have a follow-up conversation of how do we get involved? How do we do this together? We do have capability in terms of very high-quality technical personnel, but we also have some level of funding from Grody family, from different food companies. We have headquarters of Wendy's over here, headquarters of Arby's, and quite a few food companies over here who are tightly connected. So I would be very happy to tap into that network and also connect with you, Dane, with your platform.
Yeah, please. That would be absolutely fantastic. And I just wanted to say too, Anjan, that for companies who have a bit of an R&D budget, there is no limit to the number of design applications that a team can put in. So I think that's a really powerful thing for competitions like this that are so minimally constrained. Like a lot of times, you can get into some analysis paralysis, especially people who are more engineers than designers. You go, oh gosh, I don't know where to start or which idea to put forward. But it's very, very nice that you can put in as many as you like and different permutations of the same idea, that sort of thing. So I think that's really empowering.
That's fantastic. Well, hopefully I'd love to see like a product born out of this clubhouse. We can maybe say, hey, I'll start here. So hopefully you guys have a follow-up conversation. We did bring a couple folks up on stage. I want to give them an opportunity. So Joseph, do you have a question for Anjan or Dane?
May I share a little bit about what my team is doing for the Deep Space Food Challenge, Michael, or would you like it more directed towards questions? Because I do have a question as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, if you could do like a really quick Cliff Notes version of what you're doing, just make it quick, and then if you have a question.
Yeah, I'm just really so fascinated to be here and listen to you guys. My super thrilled to have a team that has a focus on insect protein as for the regenerative system, how we can create a 2 cubic meter module running on an average of 1,500 watts of power, which is like a space heater, to create this food system utilizing 3D printing, extrusion to create all different sorts of food textures and flavors, and really be able to take a limited set of ingredients and be able to create 10, 15 dishes beyond just adding water to a packet and eating out of that. Dane, this might be a question more for you since you're involved with the programming and stuff. Do you know about whether or not whether we'll be able to add kitchen equipment? Because right now there's only the use of a convection oven and as a heating source. Do you know whether we'll be able to add more sort of culinary equipment up there? And also in our team's research of fungus in space, mushrooms need to recycle all the air 4 times every hour, which is kind of crazy. So we kind of wrote off the idea of being able to add mushrooms in our system because of the need. We would have to have fungus like throughout the whole shuttle with all the necessity for the air to recycle. Just wondering if you happen to know about those 2 things. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Joseph. That was awesome. Okay, so I'll answer the second question, which sounds like first, which is a lot of fun. I would say that you can do anything that you want, and NASA has some amazing engineers who might be able to figure out other ways of adapting your solution elegantly to the specifics of the actual shuttle itself. So I wouldn't say don't do it, because you can put in more than one. You can put in more than one application if you'd like to. Then again, of course, that having mushrooms everywhere sounds a little complicated. So, but yeah, go nuts. You never know. And then the first question, what was it again?
Just the availability of different kitchen
That's right,
instruments. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I could say that you can presume anything that you want in your tech stack. But of course, the more things that you stack in there, the greater the likelihood that it would be a non-starter. So it would just be one of those things where you want to be as efficient as possible and presume as little as possible, but there's nothing that says that you can't say it's this thing and not that thing. I can also say, too, that there's a lot of really, really great information available online based on the current status quo, which, of course, can change, which is why they're doing this challenge in the first place. But if you look up the work of Grace Douglas, she's in the NASA Food Lab. She's been in there for like 20 years, and she has written a really, really wonderful primer, and she's given a really, really fantastic hour-long talk about this last year. Just the status quo of what's up there, what are the challenges, both in terms of the end food products and the history of space food, which actually Anjan gave like an amazing breakdown of. And yeah, the actual devices that are up there and why certain things aren't up there, and what the limitations are there. So like, for example, they do have a cool little small fridge unit on the ISS now that is like, I think it's an adaptation or a feature expansion of a device that was used to conduct experiments that required very specific temperatures, but they decided to expand it so it could be super cold. And so they do have this little fridge up there, but who knows what's actually going to be able to make the trip to Mars? Like, they just simply don't know. And so they're looking for a strong value proposition, really, for whatever tech that you want to include in your stack. So if having something that's in your stack is really the thing that enables you to do something truly amazing, then they're probably going to be open-minded to it.
Well, I think one of the things is that the astronauts should not be spending more than, I think it was like 4 to 8 hours a week in maintaining and in the time that they use with the module, because they should really be focused on science. So we're being very mindful of like the maintenance and like what's required to actually utilize in the function of the module, so that doesn't take too much time as well. And Michael, one thing that you mentioned about the idea of like the applications for Earth, we do have one team specifically focused on Antarctica and what foods are being made there, what the conditions are there, what they're able to grow with the different systems that they have. And so we are the Earth applications are like really very important for us as well. So that is it's just really great and fantastic to hear you guys speak. So thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Joseph. And I just want to ask just real quick, have you registered your team yet?
We have, yeah. I'm with the Terraform One and Yedin Space Agency team.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'll make sure that everything's set up there for you. So I'll reach out if there's any issues. Thanks, Joseph.
Yeah,
thanks,
Joseph. Thank you very much, Dane.
And Joseph jumped in last week when we were talking about the news and dropped a lot of knowledge about protein, bug protein. So love to hear that. Thank you for returning, Joseph. Larry Jordan, a friend of the Spoon. How you doing, Larry?
I'm doing excellent. Thanks, Michael. Excellent topic. This has just been so much fun to listen to this. Unusual and outside of the things that I think about, right? But one thing that really struck me was the conversation about the intense, the lack of your taste buds kind of needing to get more intense spices and things like that. In that scenario, are you concentrating those flavors, or are you just adding more spice, so to speak? Because some of the experiments that we've been working on are things like taking fermentations and drying them out. They're kind of influenced by stuff that Sandra Katz has been doing. these things are fundamentally inedible because they're so concentrated, but mixed in with other things, they taste great. But I just was fascinated with that part of it, where your taste buds need to get lit up, so to speak.
Larry. So what astronauts do that before their mission, they literally go to the kitchen and taste test different flavors. And, there's a set time for that, scheduled time, so that researchers in the food lab, they have enough time to package their food. So depending on their taste bud, they decide this is the level of intensity of spices or salts that they want. Now,
so if it takes the top of their head off, so to speak, they go, oh, that's good.
Yeah, and therefore I say the first mission is the toughest one, because they are told that, hey, your taste buds are going to be numb. It doesn't happen almost immediately. It happens after a week or so. It's a gradual experience that they go through. So first day they would say, hey, it's totally perfect. I'm not feeling anything. But then after a week, they will say, they will feel that, that they can't taste anything. And that's when they realize, I should have picked up a little bit more spicy. So during their second mission, they are prepared. They know that the one that gives them a kick, it gives them a little bit sweaty forehead. That's the stuff that they want.
Oh, thank you very much. That's great.
Yeah.
Anjan, why do you have any idea why there isn't something that's actually can induce the tasteless state? Some sort of like numbing factor, or an anti-Sudafed that gives them a sinus infection temporarily while they're tasting the food, so that they can better gauge what they might actually want to eat when they're up.
Yeah. So all your sensory system starts from your tongue. It goes to your nose. And it also goes pretty deep all the way in the tongue. It is controlled by gravity. It has a fluid. That fluid is sedimentate. It stays low on your taste bud, or your sensory system is very controlled by gravity, because the fluid stays low because of gravity. Now, when you go up in space, the fluid doesn't experience the gravity. So the effect of intensity of spices or that reaction does not happen as effective as it would if it was Earth. So I'm not very, very clear on this. There is obviously a very defined mechanism of what happens chemically when you have spices, how it triggers your taste buds and gives reaction to your sensory system in your mind. Those things are more detailed, and it has been studied. There are publications out there, but overall, I've seen this trend again and again among astronauts.
May I ask a question based off of Larry's question?
Sure.
Based on my understanding, when the first South Korean astronaut went to space in 2008, they really wanted to bring kimchi up there, but they didn't want to introduce lactic fermentation and bacteria that who knows what the gamma rays can cause up there. So the Koreans developed kimchi without fermentation. And so I just wanted to see, has anything changed since that time period where we are able to ferment? Because I'm not considering that as one of the food possibilities for this program that we're developing right now.
Yeah, Joseph. So there are a lot of changes. I think since 2010, when 2011 was when NASA started laying out their plans for Mars mission, and just to give you an example, there wasn't any open heated surface back then, but they started allowing some level of temperature being exposed. And so as a lot of other factors which were not allowed in the ISS are now more lenient. So you need to look into that. For food space, I think Dr. Grace Douglas, as Dane mentioned, is the best source, and she's very good at following up. So Joseph, if you ask her, she will tell you, and she will pinpoint what type of foods are restricted, what processes, fermentation, including fermentation, are restricted or not. And that should be, I think, public information by now.
Yeah, and Joseph, I would actually, if you can just email me directly, we have a direct line with Grace for this challenge. She's not able to communicate with teams. So basically any information that we give has to be made public, and really that's kind of the best thing for everybody. So the more and the better questions, the more specific questions that we get enable us to clarify or provide color to the rules in terms of what the actual practical restrictions are, other than just what the goals are looking for. So the fermentation question is fantastic. I know something that, of course, they're concerned about is the pathogens up there. And, of course, you need an awful lot of bacteria to make kimchi and that sort of thing. But please drop me a line, and I'll make sure that any and all of your questions get answered by a really, really serious Grace Douglas.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So it sounds like the beer brewer or the kombucha maker is maybe not a go at this point, but we'll see. But this has been a lot of fun. I try to keep my clubhouses to an hour, but I do want to give both Anjan and Dane just a minute or two to give people some information where they can find out more information about them. So Anjan, I think it's bhex.com, but where else can people find out information about what you're building?
Yeah, bhex.com is the best resource. Our Twitter handle is bhex_3D. We post quite a bit of things. We also have a Facebook page, but if you go to our website, you will find a link for both of them. So please follow us if you have any questions. Also, directly email me. My email is Anjan, my first name, at bhex.com. So any question regarding space food or food personalization that you have, I'll be more than happy to answer. Great.
Thank you. And Dane?
Sure. So the challenge website is deepspacefoodchallenge.org. And everything that you need hopefully is there. And if it isn't, then please email me at dane.goebel. And just to keep it simple, it's dane.goebel@gmail.com. And I'll make sure that any questions you have are answered by SMEs. And if you have any registration, eligibility questions, just general process stuff, I can help you work through that. And we want everybody to know that we're really interested in all of your ideas, and we are so hopeful that we have some we already have a lot of amazing teams, but we really want to encourage everyone to participate in this prize. And I think if we have enough amazing technology that shows up, we can make a huge difference, not just for astronauts, but for people here on Earth too.
Well, this has been great. I can't tell you how fun this room is, and this topic is so interesting to me. So I'm excited about this challenge. Anjan, it's great to hear what you're doing, and I want to kind of hear from you again soon, kind of what you're building, because it sounds like you're making a lot of progress. And Joseph, Larry, thanks for coming up on stage. Let's give both Anjan and Dana a little kind of round of applause with their mics, and thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Yeah, awesome.
All right, guys.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Dana.
Thank you so much, Anjan. Let's definitely catch up soon.
Yeah, let's catch up. Yeah. And thanks a lot, Mike, for inviting us, and we will also touch base fairly soon, okay?
All right. Plan on it. All right, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much,
you.
Mike. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.